Psychology of people who don't care about trends. While everyone was rushing to join whatever was trending that week, there was someone who watched, silent, still, unmoved. Not because they were shy, not because they were confused, not because they didn't understand what was happening. They just didn't feel the pull. While TikTok dances exploded across everyone's screens, they scrolled past. When Spotify Wrapped flooded timelines, they didn't post theirs. When everyone suddenly started dressing the same way, buying the same thing, saying the same phrases, they felt nothing. These people exist in every generation, and psychologists have a name for them, but it's probably not the one you expect. Stay with me, because once you understand what's happening in their brain, it starts to feel strangely familiar. Here's a simple question. When everyone tells you to do something, what's your first instinct? For most people, it's curiosity, maybe excitement, sometimes even relief because it removes the burden of choice. But for trend-resistant minds, the instinct is different. It's tension. Not loud resistance, not dramatic rebellion, just a quiet internal tightening that says, "Why is this being pushed on me?" Psychologists call this psychological reactance, and despite how it sounds, it has nothing to do with being stubborn. Psychological reactance is a defensive response that activates when the brain senses a threat to personal freedom. Not physical freedom, psychological freedom. When someone feels like their choices are being narrowed, even subtly, the brain pushes back. That's why being told, "You should try this, everyone is using it," can feel oddly irritating. Not because the app is bad, not because the trend is stupid, but because the suggestion carries pressure. And pressure, to certain brains, feels like control. Think about it. Why does staying up late suddenly feel appealing the moment someone tells you to go to bed? Why does the forbidden cookie taste better once it's off limits? That reaction isn't immaturity, it's wiring. We are deeply wired to protect autonomy, and trends, ironically, can feel like tiny coordinated attacks on it. But here's where people misunderstand trend-resistant individuals. They assume these people are trying to make a statement. They're not. Most of the time, they're barely thinking about the trend at all. What is happening is internal. For people who don't care about trends, similarity feels uncomfortable. Not morally, not intellectually, identity-wise. Research shows that people with a strong need for uniqueness experience psychological discomfort when they feel too similar to others. Not superior discomfort, existential discomfort. It's not, "I'm better than them." It's, "This doesn't feel like me." When a trend spreads, it doesn't just become an activity, it becomes an identity signal. Posting it says something, wearing it says something, participating places you inside a category. And for some people, categories feel constricting. It's like their sense of self has an immune system, and trends feel like foreign objects. That doesn't mean they reject everything popular. It means popularity itself doesn't add value. A trending song is just a song. A viral show is just a show. They'll like it if they like it. They won't if they don't. The social consensus doesn't tip the scale. And that's where the confusion starts. Because from the outside, this looks intentional. It looks like resistance, but often it's indifference. Now here's where things get intellectually interesting. You might be thinking, isn't avoiding trends kind of a trend? Congratulations, you've just encountered the hipster paradox. In 2014, mathematicians modeled this exact phenomenon. They found that when too many people try to be different in the same way, they end up being identical. Different outfits, same motive. Different opinions, same reaction pattern. It's elegant, it's ironic, and it's unavoidable. But true trend-resistant people aren't playing that game. They're not avoiding trends because they're trends. They simply don't orient their decisions around what others are doing. And this is where we need to draw an important distinction. There are two very different types of non-participants. The first is the contrarian. Contrarians define themselves by opposition. If something becomes popular, they immediately distrust it. If people enjoy something openly, they assume it must be shallow. Their identity depends on rejection. They don't just dislike trends, they need them to exist so they can stand against them. Their choices are still controlled by the crowd, just in reverse. The second type is the authentic non-participant. These people aren't against trends, they're just elsewhere. They operate on internal signals instead of social ones. Their decisions come from personal interest, personal values, personal curiosity. If something aligns, they engage. If it doesn't, they don't. No announcement, no performance. Here's the psychological difference. Contrarians are externally motivated. Their identity reacts to the environment. Authentic non-participants are internally motivated. Their identity originates from within. One still revolves around trends, the other barely notices them. This difference shows up clearly in research on self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is our tendency to adjust behavior based on social context. High self-monitors constantly scan for cues, what's appropriate, admired, expected. Low self-monitors don't. They aren't ignoring people. They're processing information differently. For them, the trending song doesn't feel bigger because everyone likes it. It's either pleasant or not. That's it. And here's the twist most people miss. This wiring may have been essential for survival. Throughout human history, conformity kept groups stable, but non-conformity kept them adaptable. If everyone chased the same food source, competition destroyed it. If everyone followed the same migration path, danger multiplied. But if some people naturally went, "I'm good, I'll look elsewhere," that created backup plans, exploration, alternatives, resilience. Some researchers even link this to novelty-seeking genes, like the DRD4-7R variant, sometimes called the wanderer gene. These individuals were more likely to explore beyond the group. Sometimes that meant discovery, sometimes it meant disaster. But evolution doesn't care about comfort, it cares about survival diversity. Which brings us to a question people quietly wonder about. Are people who don't care about trends happier? The answer is complicated, and that's where part 2 begins. Because while not caring about trends protects autonomy, it also changes how you experience belonging. And the cost of that difference isn't talked about nearly enough. So, are people who don't care about trends happier? The answer doesn't give a simple answer. And honestly, that complexity is the most honest part. On one hand, trend-resistant people often report higher satisfaction with their choices. They don't experience FOMO in the same way because they're not constantly measuring themselves against what everyone else is doing. When they buy something, it feels intentional. When they spend time on something, it feels chosen. Their life feels owned. There's a quiet confidence that comes from acting on internal alignment rather than external momentum. But there's another side to this. Humans are social creatures. Belonging isn't optional. It's biological. Trends, for all their flaws, create shared moments. Inside jokes, collective excitement, the feeling of being part of the same moment in time. When you opt out of trends consistently, you also opt out of some connection. You miss conversations, you don't share reference points, you're occasionally out of the loop. And while that might not bother you emotionally, it can still create distance. This is why research suggests that selective participation tends to correlate with the highest life satisfaction. Not full conformity, not total resistance, but discernment. Joining what genuinely resonates, skipping what doesn't,
without turning either choice into an identity. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Some people who believe they are authentic non-participants are actually contrarians in disguise. If your first reaction to something popular is, "That's basic," or "People are sheep," then trends still control you. You're just orbiting them from the opposite direction. True autonomy isn't automatic rejection, and it isn't automatic participation either. It's the ability to evaluate something independent of its social status, to enjoy something popular without irony, to skip something viral without superiority, to wear what's comfortable, to like what you like. The real test is simple.
If the trend disappeared tomorrow, would your behavior change? If the answer is no, your choice was authentic. If the answer is yes, you were still performing just differently. And this is where psychology lands. People who don't care about trends aren't smarter. They aren't more evolved. They're not missing out either. They're simply wired to prioritize different signals. Some brains are tuned to social harmony, what's shared, what's collective, what brings people together. Other brains are tuned inward, personal meaning, internal alignment, quiet curiosity. Neither is superior. Problems only arise when one side mistakes its preference for a moral position, when trend followers see independence as arrogance, when trend-resistant people see participation as weakness. But underneath all of it, we're all navigating the same tension: freedom versus belonging, autonomy versus connection. And the healthiest minds learn how to move between both consciously. So if you're someone who doesn't care about trends, psychology isn't telling you to change. It's asking you to understand why, to recognize when your independence is grounded and when it might be reactionary. Because not caring about trends isn't a flaw, but it's also not a badge. It's simply one way of moving through the world. And the more aware you are of that choice, the freer it actually becomes.